All right, happy Thursday. We're in the FITSNews studio. I'm in my New York Knights jersey today. How about that? Old school from the movie The Natural, which, God, man, is that 40 years old? 40-year-old movie? I'm old, man. I'm old. I'll tell you what else is old and what's getting old is South Carolina politicians doing nothing on important issues. But shocker, that's happening again this week. This time, it's the issue of election reform. Now, South Carolina is a state that has had a number of problems with elections, particularly in the Midlands region of the state, where one of the largest counties, Richland County, has seen numerous elections marred by serious irregularities. And in fact, back in 2012, there was an election where there were illegal, actually illegal shortages of voting machines that were targeted to precincts where tax hikes were unpopular, and particularly precincts where a 2010 tax hike was defeated. So what they did was they targeted voting machine shortages on these very areas where tax hikes were unpopular. And as a result, they got a $1.8 billion tax hike passed. So again, I don't know what's more corrupt than that. And I spent a lot of time calling on DOJ to get involved, investigate. Never happened. I called on state officials to get involved too, but they are limited in what they can do. And in fact, let's fast forward to last year, the City of Columbia mayoral election. As this news outlet covered exclusively, there were also serious irregularities in that election. And that prompted the South Carolina Election Commission Executive Director to write a letter to Richland County basically saying, you guys haven't fixed anything. Your elections are still a joke. There's still fraud and incompetence. There's still questionable ballots being submitted. There's still all sorts of eligibility questions, alleged tampering, you name it. You guys haven't fixed it. So here's what I'm proposing. And again, I want to open the microphone on this. I want to have a conversation about this. But we have got to get, number one, a better structure in place for who administers these laws. And then number two, we need better laws, okay? So let's start with the structure, okay? In South Carolina, currently we have an election commission, 5 people appointed by the governor, and underneath them is an executive director. Now, why not just make the executive director under the governor? Why do we need all these middlemen? I don't get it. But again, this is South Carolina, and if you're expecting government to make sense, you have come to the wrong state. But whoever that person in charge, ultimately in charge of the election administration, that person needs to be someone who's directly accountable to the voters, whether that's the governor, whether that's an independently elected Secretary of State, for example. I don't really care, but we've got to have somebody who oversees that process who is directly accountable to the voters. Otherwise, again, we're not going to have any accountability. We're going to have splintered accountability. As we've learned on too many issues in this state where accountability is splintered, it really doesn't exist. So once you solve that problem, once you figure out, okay, who are we going to put in charge, then we got to address the problem of voter fraud at the local and county level. Because, folks, 99.9% of the problems in this state with elections are at the local level, where lawmakers and their cronies decide who gets to serve on these local commissions. Enough. We cannot have that. Lawmakers have shown they're incompetent when it comes to picking judges. They're every bit as incompetent when it comes to picking these local election officials. So here's what we need to do. Make these municipal and county level election commissions subdivisions of the state. In other words, put them under the state election commission or whoever we decide is going to be that chief election officer. But again, we cannot have local governments or local entities in charge of this process because, again, it just isn't working. So once we get the structure in place, how do we make better laws? To me, that starts with securing the ballot. That means voter ID. That means making sure anyone who requests a ballot through the mail submits an ID, has a signature that matches, has a witness. Again, basic things. Voting by mail isn't the problem, people. Donald Trump is wrong about that. Voting by mail is not the problem. The problem is a process by which we don't secure the ballot. Voting by mail can actually be more secure than voting in person. So I have no problem with it. Again, as long as it's a narrow window and as long as we have standards for accepting those ballots. I have no problem with voting by mail. It's convenient. A lot of people want to use it. Great. Make sure the integrity of the ballot is protected. We don't do that in South Carolina right now. Currently, South Carolina Republicans are debating a law. If you want to go online, it's Resolution 4919. doesn't do much, people. It doesn't create the sort of structure that I'm talking about. It doesn't put those local governments and local election commissions under the state. And it sure as hell doesn't require the sort of ballot security that we need. So should we expect better, more secure, freer, safer elections in South Carolina anytime soon? No, we shouldn't, because what the Republican-led legislature is doing right now fails to solve the problem. You want to learn more about this issue? Check out FITSNews.com. Appreciate you taking the time to hear me out on this issue.